All the characters in the story are over 18 years old. Mary gently pushed the door with her fingers, which quietly opened, letting her inside the room. She saw a spacious and cozy room, decorated in a restrained and concise style. The spacious room with high walls, painted in a light shade, created a feeling of lightness, despite the minimal amount of furniture. The only interior items that attracted attention were a beige leather sofa, a small glass table, and a comfortable office chair with upholstered upholstery and rotating wheels. A slender woman stood in front of the window, flooded with daylight. Her figure was accentuated by a formal business suit that fitted her perfectly. She stood motionless, facing the window and leaning on the wide sill with her hands, as if she was enthusiastically watching something happening behind the glass. The silence of the room emphasized her concentration. The wind slightly swayed the curtains, adding a sense of movement to this static space. Mary froze for a moment, involuntarily noting the grace and confidence that emanated from the stranger. She felt that this meeting could be the beginning of something important, but she did not yet know what exactly lay ahead. "You're late," said a deep, husky voice that sounded calm, but with a clear hint of reproach. The woman standing in the center of the room lifted her chin slightly and made a smooth movement, shaking her long, glossy hair that shimmered in the soft lamplight. She turned to the speaker, and her appearance immediately attracted attention. It was not easy to determine her age. Her delicate, well-groomed skin resembled velvet, giving her the appearance of a young student. However, the thin, barely noticeable lines of wrinkles around the eyes and on the forehead betrayed life experience and maturity. Her thin lips lifted slightly in a half-smile, and her eyes, hidden behind oblong glasses with square, rounded lenses, carefully studied those present. These glasses gave her appearance a certain restraint and seriousness, although the gentleness of her manner added warmth. At that moment, Tom entered the room, following his mother. He froze for a moment at the threshold, examining the stranger with an expression of mild surprise. His gaze quickly ran over her from head to toe. The woman, noticing this, answered him with a light, slightly ironic smile, which seemed either friendly or a little mysterious. Without hurrying, she glided over to the armchair by the fireplace. Her movements were confident, but at the same time graceful, like a model used to catwalk shows. Her high heels barely made a sound on the wooden floor, and the thin fabric of her dress accentuated her grace. Coming closer, she sat down slightly in an armchair, folded her hands on the arms, and looked attentively at Tom and his mother, waiting for the further development of the conversation. Her presence seemed to fill the room with a new atmosphere, a mixture of confidence, mystery, and subtle charm that seemed to leave no one indifferent. "My name is Jessica, but you can just call me Jess," she said with a slight smile, casually resting her palms on the soft, velvet back of the chair. Her voice sounded confident and friendly, but with a touch of casual lightness, as if she was used to feeling comfortable in any situation. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Jess," Mary replied, bowing her head slightly in greeting. "And this modest young man next to me is my son Tom." Tom, upon hearing his name, only nodded slightly, avoiding Jessica's eyes. Her charm and confidence clearly made a strong impression on him, and he looked a little embarrassed. Jessica easily walked around the chair, her movements graceful and precise, as if no random detail existed in this world. She sank smoothly into a chair, adopting a relaxed pose, but her posture still maintained inner composure. "Have a seat. Don't be shy," she said, pointing to a spacious sofa with elegant upholstery in the corner of the room. "Today he is completely at your disposal." Mary smiled gratefully and went over to the sofa. Her gaze swept over the cozy atmosphere of the room. The delicate shades of fabrics, the flickering light of the floor lamp, and the quiet crackling of the fireplace created an atmosphere of peace and warmth. Tom hesitantly joined his mother, carefully sitting down next to her. "Thank you. It's really cozy here," Mary said, looking around the room. "I try to keep things tidy, but the main thing is that everyone feels comfortable here," Jessica remarked with a light laugh, running her hand over the armrest of the chair. Her ease in communication gradually relieved the tension. Tom finally risked looking up at Jessica, and she greeted him with a friendly smile, as if inviting him to a conversation. "Well, how do you like my humble abode? What is it? She asked, her eyes sparkling playfully. The silence in the room was replaced by a lively conversation, in which Jessica skillfully maintained a relaxed atmosphere. She seemed to have a special gift to make everyone feel welcome. Mary and Tom examined the sofa carefully, as if trying to assess its comfort. The thin, pleasant-to-touch upholstery, the exquisite design and the softness with which it bent under the weight immediately betrayed its premium quality. They sat down without saying a word, noting at the same time how comfortably they settled on his wide cushions. "Well, Mary," Jessica began, pulling a small table over to a chair, "I have carefully studied your letter. What you have described is really serious. But I want to warn you, the root of the problem goes much deeper than it seems at first glance." She carefully took a small notebook with bookmarks and an elegant pin with gold dusting from the pocket of her leather bag. Her fingers, deftly holding the instrument, began to draw lines of notes in the notebook. Each word, written in a clear handwriting, seemed to have a special meaning that only she would soon understand. "With your permission, I'll ask a few questions to clarify the details," she added, glancing up at Mary and then glancing briefly at Tom. Memories washed over Mary like waves flooding the shore. Tom, her son, has changed a lot in the last year. It seemed that the cheerful boy, who was busy with pranks from morning to evening, suddenly became an adult. His voice became heavier, acquiring the hoarseness characteristic of a mature man, and his manner became more confident. Now their conversations no longer resembled mother-son dialogues. They were more like conversations between two adults, each striving to be heard. Tom not only listened, but also expressed his opinion, sometimes so firmly that it caused Mary to have mixed feelings. One day, over a cup of tea, they discussed family matters. Tom looked at his mother carefully and said, "Mom, you always decided everything by yourself. Maybe it's time to let others help?" Her heart ached, but she held back her emotions. His words sounded sincere, but there was something new in them, maturity and understanding. "Help me? What is it?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. "Do you think I can't handle it?" "No, not really," Tom replied with a shrug. "I just see that you're getting tired, and I feel like I can take care of some of the worries." This dialogue was a turning point for her. She realized that this was no longer a boy, but a man who was ready to make decisions. But with that came anxiety. Would she be able to trust him completely? Now, sitting on the couch in Jessica's room, she realized that this particular turning point was the beginning of their current problem. The weight of the memories was reflected in her gaze, which became detached for a moment. "Mary," Jessica's voice brought her back to the present, "I think you have something to tell me." "I'm listening to you." Mary looked at Jessica and took a deep breath, preparing for a long and difficult conversation. Mary was sitting in her room, staring at one point and thinking about the upcoming conversation with her son. Her thoughts revolved around the words she had to say and the reaction she expected from Tom. She took a deep breath, got up from the bed, and, hesitating slightly, headed for his room. The hall was quiet, and only the sound of her footsteps broke the silence of the house. When she reached her son's door, she stopped for a moment. She knocked. The sound was barely audible, but after a few seconds, the door slowly opened. Tom appeared in the doorway, with a slightly surprised expression on his face. "Mom, are you frozen? Something happened?" "What is it?" he asked, tilting his head slightly. Mary felt her heart beat faster. She braced herself, straightened up, and said, "Tom, listen to me. You're a grown man now, and I know everything." Her voice sounded firm, but there was a hidden tremor in it that did not escape her son's attention. Tom squinted, as if trying to figure out what was being said, and opened his mouth to say something, but Mary didn't give him a chance to continue. "Wait a minute. Listen to me," she interrupted, raising her hand. "I pretended for a long time that I didn't notice anything. I pretended it didn't concern me. But yesterday," Tom felt his heart skip a beat and then start pounding harder. His breathing became shallow, and a wave of anxiety rose inside. A shudder ran through my body, as if invisible goosebumps slid over my skin. His mind raced from one assumption to the next. Each new idea seemed worse than the previous one. "Yesterday? What is it?" he asked, trying to sound calm, but his voice faltered. He recalled the events of the previous evening. Scenes popped up before his eyes one after another, and each of them seemed suspicious to him now. Had he made a mistake? Were his actions too obvious? No, it just couldn't be. I was careful? Or is it still not enough? It flashed through his mind. Tom looked down at the floor, trying to control his excitement. Mary took a step forward, her shadow crossing the boundary between the hallway and the room. She kept talking. Yesterday, I accidentally saw something that made me think. I didn't want to pry into your life, but you should know that you can't hide it anymore. Tom felt his palms getting wet. The situation was escalating, and he couldn't figure out exactly what she meant. All he could do was wait for her words, which could change a lot. Mary, noticing his tension, paused to find the right words. Her face expressed a mixture of concern and determination. She understood that the conversation would be difficult, but she knew that she could no longer avoid it. Tom, I'm not saying this to reproach you. I want to help, but I need you to be honest with me. Are you ready to tell me what's really going on? Tom looked up, and his eyes met hers. At that moment, he realized that there was no point in avoiding the truth anymore. I'm aware of everything, she said with firmness in her voice. I couldn't close my eyes last night. Tom turned slightly pale, and his body froze in anticipation. Mary continued, her voice becoming deeper and more agitated. I suffered from insomnia. I couldn't sleep for a long time. Lying on my bed, facing the window, I thought about many things. At some point, sleep began to come, and it seemed to me that I had passed out, but it was only superficial. I heard the door open a crack, and I felt that someone was standing next to me. This man has been near my bed for a long time. I don't understand, Tom muttered, twitching his arms in confusion. Hush, I'm not done yet, Mary said sternly, interrupting him. She paused to collect her thoughts. There was confidence in her voice, but there was also concern behind it. At that moment, I felt something that I hadn't felt in a long time. We made love, and this moment was so unexpected. Tom, was that you? She whispered, her voice trembling with excitement. Listen, Tom began quietly, not knowing how to express his thoughts correctly. It's a very exciting story, Jessica said, sitting in an armchair with obvious interest on her face. She folded her hands in her lap and waited eagerly for further developments. There was tension in the air, and Mary, seeing Jessica's reaction, realized that this conversation would drag on. Let me explain, she continued, trying to find the right words. We have too many unresolved issues in our family, and perhaps this incident was just the beginning of something deeper. Tom lowered his eyes, his inner excitement growing. As if trapped, he didn't know how to react to his mother's words, which revealed a new, previously unfamiliar side of their relationship. We all grow and change, Mary added, trying to lighten the mood. But sometimes these changes can surprise us. It is important that we can discuss all this openly and honestly. She saw tears welling up in Tom's eyes. He sighed, gathering all his resolve. I really want to understand what happened, he finally said, his voice low but confident. Jessica, watching this dynamic with interest, decided to step in. Maybe we could all talk about this together. This will allow you to understand each other better. Mary and Tom exchanged glances, and a quiet but meaningful conversation began between them, full of understatement and hope for reconciliation. But as far as I can tell, this problem started to arise earlier, didn't it? The woman continued. Her voice sounded confident and insistent. Jessica pushed herself slightly off the floor and turned to face Tom, her gaze full of expectation. Tom, tell me, when exactly did you first feel interested in me? Jessica asked, her tone soft but insistent. Tom found himself in a very awkward situation, and it held him down. He stared at the floor, trying to avoid being looked at, and his cheeks began to turn red with shame. Tom, we're here to help you, Jess said, trying to sound reassuring. The guy looked up and met Jess's eyes. At the age of 14, he said softly but confidently, Look, you really need support, but in order to get it, you have to be completely honest with us, Jess said, her voice sounding serious. We're ready to help you, Tom, she added, giving her tone a hint of sincerity. Jess kicked off the floor again with a light movement of her foot, and turned her attention to Mary. In your letter you mentioned that for a certain time Tom came to you every night. Couldn't you just stop it? What is it? She asked, her eyes fixed on Mary. Jess's eyes were full of mystery and depth, but at the same time they expressed a demanding look that could be seen even through the slightly distorted lenses of her glasses. Mary felt that look on her, which was a mixture of questions and a certain expectation. She knew that she had to give an answer, and that a lot depended on her words right now. I didn't know how to stop it, Mary finally said, her voice trembling with excitement. I thought it was temporary, that eventually everything would calm down. Jessica furrowed her brows, her attention becoming even more insistent. But did you realize that it was wrong? What is it? She asked, her tone becoming more demanding. Mary sighed, feeling her shoulders relax from the pressure. I didn't know how to react to my feelings, and I thought everything would settle down, she explained, her voice sounding like awe. Tom looked down again, and doubts arose in his soul. We're here to deal with this situation, Jess said, turning back to him. It is important that you be sincere with yourself and with us. Silence hung in the air, and everyone present understood that this conversation would be a crucial moment in their lives. It all seemed harmless in the beginning, Mary replied. I saw it as a game and never thought that one day something like this would happen. Now Mary felt anxiety building up inside her, and she became a little tight and constrained. The psychologist continued to ask her clients questions, occasionally throwing up provocative topics to find out more. The hour hand had passed the 6 o'clock mark in the evening, which meant that the session was nearing its end. Jess got up from her chair, making notes in her notebook throughout the session. So, one session won't be enough. We'll need to meet again, she said, turning to Mary. You can go now, but I still have a few questions for Tom. Don't worry, I'll make sure he gets home safely. Mary, slightly distancing herself from her worries, got up from the sofa and headed for the exit. Tom and Jess were left alone in the room. The woman went to the window and, a few minutes later, noticed Mary slowly walking away and disappearing around the corner of the street. Jessica walked across the room to the door and stopped, looking around. Tom clearly heard the sound of the lock clicking when the door was locked. There was a silence in the room that seemed to cover them completely. Jess came closer to Tom and asked if he would mind if she sat next to him. He didn't mind. Jess sat down next to him, but Tom, feeling some inner awkwardness, pushed her away, as if not ready for intimacy and openness. Jessica was slightly surprised, but she remained calm. She understood that such situations could occur, and perhaps it was just Tom's defensive reaction to what was happening. It's okay, Tom, she said with understanding. I'm here to help you, and if you need some space, I'll respect that. Tom didn't know what to say, and just remained silent, his thoughts racing in different directions. Jess, watching him, decided to wait a bit to give him time to collect his thoughts. She understood that sometimes silence says more than words. Violent emotions were playing out inside Tom. He didn't know how to open up and express his feelings, so he preferred to stay in the shadow of his thoughts, detached from the situation. Meanwhile, Jessica, continuing to watch him closely, tried to create an atmosphere of security and trust so that he could feel that he could talk about his feelings when he was ready. Well, Tom, you're free, Jess said, getting up from her chair. There was displeasure in her eyes. She always tried to get what she wanted, and the last moments of communication with Tom left her with a residue of disappointment. Come visit me this weekend at 4 p.m. I'll cook something special for you, Jess added, trying to regain her confidence. At that moment, Tom couldn't help himself and they found themselves in each other's arms, their feelings coming to the fore. The woman sat up slightly, smiled cheerfully, and went to the window to look out at the street. Discouraged by what had happened, Tom headed for the exit, feeling his thoughts get confused in a whirlpool of emotions. He walked towards the house, endlessly replaying all the events of that evening in his head, as if trying to figure out their meaning. Every moment, every word and touch returned to his memory. Turning back, Tom noticed a familiar silhouette on the 8th floor, who was watching him intently. Suddenly, his heart started pounding as he realized that this was more than just a simple observation. There was something intimate and mysterious about that gaze. The silhouette remained motionless, as if waiting for his reaction. and Tom felt a mixture of anxiety and curiosity begin to form inside him. He didn't know what exactly he should do. Come closer or, conversely, walk away and not turn around. Every step towards the house was difficult for him, and thoughts of who could be in that window haunted him. His imagination drew different scenarios, and with each step these images became more vivid. Tom walked quickly along the road, trying to get rid of the feeling that he was being watched. But despite everything, he couldn't ignore the fact that someone might know more about his secrets and experiences than he did.